Yoon Tae-ho had walked into the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Assembly 114 times before this day. Each time, he had entered with his back straight, his documents in order, and the careful smile of a man who understood that humanity was still the newest and weakest voice in a room full of ancient civilizations. He had learned to be patient. He had learned to be polite. He had learned to swallow small insults because the bigger picture demanded it. Today he walked in expecting a routine session about trade lane adjustments near the outer colonies. His aide had briefed him on the shuttle ride over. It was supposed to be boring. 2 hours, maybe 3. Han Do-yoon sat 3 rows behind him in the observation gallery, dressed in plain clothes, looking like a minor attaché who had nothing better to do. That was exactly how Do-yoon preferred to look. He was the director of Earth's Intelligence Bureau, and he had not missed a single assembly session in 4 years. He never spoke. He only watched. The Grand Chamber was enormous. It floated in orbit at the edge of the Sol system, a station built by the Assembly centuries before humans had even discovered fire. The ceiling curved upward into a dome of living light that shifted colors depending on which species held the floor. Hundreds of delegations filled the curved rows of seats, each one representing a civilization that had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years. Humanity had been given provisional membership just 11 years ago. Their seats were in the back corner, near the maintenance corridor. The session began normally. 3 minor proposals were voted on. A boundary dispute between 2 insectoid species was resolved in 7 minutes. Tae-ho was checking his notes for the trade discussion when the lights in the dome shifted to deep violet, the color of the Telvari Dominion. Voron Seleth, the High Speaker of the Galactic Assembly, rose from his elevated platform at the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with a segmented body covered in dark blue plates. His species, the Telvari, had ruled the Assembly for over 600 years. They were not the strongest species militarily, but they were the most politically connected, and Voron had held his position for 3 decades by being smarter and more ruthless than anyone who challenged him. He did not announce the trade discussion. Instead, he called a special motion. Tae-ho felt something cold settle in his stomach. The floor was given to the Telvari delegation. A junior diplomat stepped forward and began reading from a list. 12 formal grievances against the species known as humanity. The chamber went quiet, not with concern, but with interest, the way a crowd goes quiet when they sense entertainment. The grievances were varied. Humanity had expanded its colonies beyond the approved boundary by 600 kilometers. Humanity had refused to share its military research with the Assembly's Science Council. 3 minor species in the outer systems had begun adopting human art, music, and language, which the Telvari called cultural contamination. Each grievance was presented with visual evidence on the chamber's central display, but it was the final portion that made Tae-ho's hands tighten on his armrest. Voron Seleth took the floor himself. He played recordings from human history, nuclear explosions, world wars, famine, oil fires burning across darkened skies. He narrated each clip with a tone that was almost cheerful, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson to very slow children. "This," Voron said, gesturing at a clip of a mushroom cloud, "is what they did to their own world, their own people." He paused and looked directly at Tae-ho across the chamber. "And we gave them ships." Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough. Dozens of delegations, some openly, some hiding it behind their appendages or translation devices. Tae-ho heard it clearly. He had spent 11 years in this chamber, and he had never heard that sound directed at Earth before. Voron proposed a motion. Revoke Earth's provisional membership. Place all human colonies under Telvari administrative oversight, and reduce Earth's defense fleet to 30 vessels. 30. Earth currently operated 162. Tejo was given 3 minutes to respond. The chamber lights did not change color for him, because humanity had no assigned color yet. He spoke into the silence. High Speaker, the grievances presented today contain multiple factual errors that I would be happy to address if given adequate. The floor recognizes the human delegation's response, Voron interrupted smoothly. Noted, we proceed to vote. Tejo's mouth was still open. 3 minutes. He had used 17 seconds. The vote was called. The numbers climbed on the central display. In favor of the motion, 187. Against, 4. The 4 votes came from species so small and powerless that their names did not even appear in most galactic databases. 187 civilizations had just voted to cage humanity, and most of them had done it without a second thought. The chamber broke into conversation. Delegations turned to each other, already moving on to the next item on the agenda. For them, this had been a minor matter. A small species put back in its place, nothing worth remembering by dinner. Tejo gathered his documents slowly. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. Doyon appeared beside him, moving through the crowd without drawing any attention. He leaned close to Tejo's ear. Did you get all of that? Doyon whispered. Every word, Tejo said. They walked toward the exit together. The great doors of the grand chamber stood open ahead of them. Tejo stopped at the threshold. He turned back. The chamber was still buzzing with casual noise. Alien voices discussing lunch plans and scheduling conflicts, and things that mattered to species who had never once been told they were not enough. Tejo spoke clearly, not shouting, not emotional, just clear enough that the nearest delegations heard him, and the chamber's recording systems caught every syllable. You will regret making us feel small. A few heads turned. A Telvari commentator near the press gallery chuckled and made a note on her display. Within an hour, the clip was being played on alien entertainment feeds as a joke. The little human, making threats at the door. How amusing. 8,000 light-years away, President Quan Min-jae watched the broadcast alone in his office. He let the feed play to the end. He watched the laughter. He watched Voron Selik's satisfied expression. He watched the vote count, 187 to 4. Then he closed the screen and turned to his waiting cabinet. Wake up Shin Nari, he said quietly. Tell her Project Ember is no longer theoretical. The call reached Shin Nari at 1947 Earth Standard Time. She was asleep at her desk in a laboratory buried 300 meters below the Sejong Research Complex in South Korea. She had been asleep for 40 minutes. Before that, she had been awake for 31 hours straight, running simulations on a weapons system that her own government had told her might never be used. The phone buzzed twice. She picked it up, listened for 9 seconds, and then sat very still for a long time. Then she stood up, tied her hair back, and started making calls of her own. Project Ember had been her life for 6 years. It had started as a theory she had scribbled on a napkin during a late-night funding meeting. A network of microsatellites, each one no larger than a suitcase, disguised as ordinary space debris. They had been launched, quietly, over the past 6 years, hidden inside routine cargo shipments, attached to the undersides of commercial transports, even dropped from survey drones during approved scientific missions. Nobody had noticed because nobody had been looking. Humanity was small. Humanity was harmless. Why would anyone check their garbage? There were 9,214 of them, scattered across every major shipping lane in the galaxy. Each one carried a directed electromagnetic pulse charge strong enough to shut down any vessel within 200 kilometers. They could not destroy a ship. They could not kill anyone. But they could make every system on board go completely and instantly dead. Engines, weapons, shields, communications, life support backup generators, everything. A ship hit by ember would drift in silence until someone came to tow it home. Nari's job tonight was simple in concept and terrifying in practice. She had to arm all 9,000 satellites, confirm their targeting locks, and make sure that when the signal came, they would fire within the same 60-second window across 12 different star systems. She started working. She did not stop. Across the solar system, behind Jupiter's moon Callisto, Commander Baek Ji-soo stood on the bridge of the Baekdu, Earth's largest carrier and the flagship of the United Defense Fleet. The Baekdu was not supposed to exist. Officially, Earth's fleet was made up of aging patrol ships and light escorts, the kind of vessels that made alien inspectors yawn during their annual reviews. The Baekdu had been built in secret over 4 years, inside an asteroid that had been hollowed out for exactly this purpose. Jisoo received her orders through an encrypted channel that even the Assembly's best signal interceptors could not crack, because it did not use any technology the Assembly knew about. It used quantum-paired particles that Nari's team had developed 3 years ago and never reported to the Galactic Science Council. Every piece of technology Earth had shared with the Assembly was real, but it was never the best they had. Jisoo began recalling ships. She did it carefully, using rotation schedules and maintenance orders as cover. To any outside observer, Earth's scattered patrol vessels were simply cycling through their normal duties. In reality, 140 warships were quietly converging on hidden rally points across 4 systems. She stood at the tactical display and watched the green dots moving. Each dot was a ship. Each ship held a crew who had trained for years for a night they hoped would never come. It had come. Meanwhile, Han Do-yoon sat in a small dark room on the assembly station and opened a secure channel to 12 different alien worlds. On each of those worlds, a human operative answered. These were people who had spent years, some nearly a decade, living among alien species. They had learned alien languages, adopted alien customs, taken alien names. They worked in shipping offices and communication centers and government buildings. They were translators and janitors and cargo inspectors. Nobody had ever suspected them, because nobody thought humans were smart enough to plant spies. Do-yoon gave each operative the same instruction: upload everything. Fleet positions, supply routes, communication relay codes, patrol schedules, the personal habits of every military commander in the sector. 6 years of carefully gathered intelligence began flowing into Earth systems in a river of data. Jisoo's tactical team received it in real time and began updating their battle maps. Yoon Tae-ho stayed on the assembly station. He had a role to play, and he played it perfectly. He filed a formal protest against the assembly vote. He sent politely worded letters to 30 different delegations requesting an appeal hearing. He visited the Assembly's legal office and submitted 12 documents challenging the procedural validity of the motion. Each action was calm, measured, and exactly what a humiliated diplomat was expected to do. None of it mattered. All of it was theater. Late in the evening, Tae-ho made one visit that was not theater. He walked to the quarters of Owner Reese, the ambassador of the Haroon Collective. The Haroon were a quiet species, tall, silver-skinned, with wide dark eyes that made them look permanently thoughtful. They had voted against the motion. They were one of the 4. Tae-ho sat across from Ona in her small sitting room. She offered him tea. He declined. "I need you to do something," he said. "Pull your ships back from sectors 7 through 14 by morning." Ona studied him. She had known Tae-ho for 8 years. She had watched him absorb insult after insult in the assembly with a patience that she privately found remarkable and slightly frightening. "Why?" she asked. "Please don't ask why." She was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her communicator and gave the order. No questions, no demands for explanation. She trusted him, and that trust was about to save every Huron vessel in the affected zones. Tae-ho thanked her and left. At 2 o'clock GMT, President Kwon Min-jae appeared on every screen on Earth. The broadcast was short. He stood in his office, looking directly into the camera, and spoke in the same soft, steady voice he always used. "Tomorrow, the world will look different," he said. "I ask you to trust us, and to be ready." He did not explain. 7 billion people watched the broadcast, and most of them understood something enormous was happening, even if they did not know what. At 0400 GMT, every piece was in place. Nari confirmed that all 9,000 satellites were armed and locked. Doyun confirmed that intelligence uploads were complete. Taeho confirmed that the assembly suspected nothing. The Telvari had already moved on to other business. Humanity's humiliation was yesterday's news. Jisoo stood alone on the bridge of the Baekdu. The tactical display showed the entire galaxy mapped in points of light. Green for human assets, red for known enemy positions, gray for neutrals. There were far more green dots than anyone in the assembly would have believed possible. She opened a channel to all ships. 140 crews stopped what they were doing and listened. "Ember Protocol," Jisoo said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Initiate at dawn." Then she closed the channel and stood in the silence, watching the stars through the bridge windows, and waited for the sun to rise on a world that did not yet know it was about to change. At exactly 6 o'clock, Greenwich Mean Time, 9,000 satellites woke up at the same moment across 12 star systems. They had drifted for years among clouds of rock and metal and frozen waste, looking like nothing, meaning nothing to the sensors that occasionally swept past them. For 6 years, they had been patient. Now, in one shared breath, they opened their eyes and fired. The effect was immediate and absolute. Across the 12 busiest shipping lanes in the galaxy, over 600 Telvari military and merchant vessels were struck by cascading electromagnetic pulses that moved through their systems like a wave of silence. Engines stopped. Lights died. Weapons powered down. Shield generators went cold. Communication arrays collapsed into static, and then into nothing at all. In the space of 90 seconds, the entire forward fleet of the Telvari Dominion, the most powerful military force in the known galaxy, went dark. Not a single shot was fired. Not a single crew member was harmed. The ships simply stopped, hanging motionless in the black, their crews alive and confused and completely unable to call for help. On the bridge of the Telvari battlecruiser Volf, the largest warship in the forward fleet, Commander Drew Pak stood in total darkness for the first time in his military career. Emergency lighting flickered once and died. The backup generators, which were supposed to be independent of the main power grid, did not activate, because the Ember Pulse had been designed specifically to find and kill backup systems too. Nari had spent an extra 2 years making sure of that. Drew's crew moved around him in the dark, voices tight with controlled panic. Someone found a chemical light stick and cracked it. In the pale green glow, Drew could see his own reflection in the dead display screen in front of him. He was a soldier who had commanded fleets for 40 years. He had won battles against species that most civilizations could not even name. And in this moment, standing in the dark on a ship that would not answer him, he understood something that made his blood feel cold. This was not an attack. This was a message. At the same moment, Han Do-yoon's operatives executed the second phase. From 12 different worlds, they uploaded the complete, unedited recording of the previous day's assembly session to every public broadcast network in the galaxy. Every species with a screen saw it. They saw Voron Seleth playing clips of human suffering and laughing. They saw the chamber laughing with him. They saw the vote, 187-4. They saw Taeho being cut off after 17 seconds. And beside the recording, in clean text, translated into 400 alien languages, was a single line from Earth. "This is how they treated us. Watch what happens next." The broadcast spread faster than any military signal could have. Within 30 minutes, it was the most watched piece of media in galactic history. Species that had never cared about humanity before were watching. Species that had laughed at the vote were watching themselves laugh and feeling something uncomfortable twist in their stomachs. Then the fleet arrived. Baek Jisoo brought 140 warships out of hiding, in a coordinated emergence that military analysts would later call the most precisely timed fleet maneuver ever recorded. The ships did not appear in scattered groups or staggered waves. They appeared all at once, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the exact same second, across 9 different locations, each one positioned at a critical choke point that the Telvari needed to reach their disabled forward fleet. The ships did not fire. They did not need to. They simply sat there, engines humming, weapons charged, blocking every route the Telvari could use to rescue or resupply their stranded vessels. Jisoo stood on the bridge of the Baekdu and opened a broadcast on every available channel, military, civilian, diplomatic, commercial. Her voice carried across the galaxy. "This is Commander Baek Jisoo of the United Earth Fleet. Your ships are disabled, not destroyed. Your people are alive, not harmed. We are not here to start a war. We are here to finish an insult. Any vessel that does not approach our positions will not be touched. Any vessel that does will be disabled in the same manner. This is not a threat, it is a fact." She closed the channel and waited. The waiting was the hardest part. On the assembly station, the grand chamber erupted into chaos. Delegations that had been casually eating breakfast when the news broke were now scrambling to their seats, shouting over each other, demanding emergency sessions and military responses. The dome lights flickered between colors as a dozen species tried to claim the floor at once. Voran Seleth stood at his podium and called for order. His voice, usually so smooth and commanding, had a crack in it that had not been there before. He demanded that the assembly authorize a combined military response against Earth. He called humanity terrorists. He called the Ember attack an act of war. But the numbers did not support him. The Telvari forward fleet was paralyzed. Their reserve fleet, stationed 3 systems away, would take a minimum of 3 days to arrive. And, as Drew Pak's staff officers managed to get a single short-range communicator working aboard the Valve, they sent a message that reached Voron within the hour. The humans appeared to know the exact location and heading of every reserve fleet vessel. Moving then would be like walking into a trap that was already set and waiting. Then Ona Reese stood. The Haroon ambassador walked calmly to the center of the chamber. Her silver skin caught the shifting light of the dome. She looked around at the delegations, some frightened, some angry, some simply stunned. "The Haroon Collective," she said, "calls for immediate mediation between Earth and the Assembly. We note that no lives have been lost, no ships have been destroyed, and no territory has been seized. We further note that the events of yesterday, the public humiliation of a member species, the suppression of their right to speak, and the passage of a punitive motion based on fabricated evidence, may have contributed to the current situation." The word fabricated hit the chamber like a cold wind. Voron opened his mouth to object. Before he could speak, 3 other delegations stood in support of Anna's motion, then 5 more, then 12. Species that had quietly sympathized with humanity, but never dared to speak against the Telvari, were now finding their courage, because the balance of power had shifted overnight, and everyone in the chamber could feel it. Yoon Taeho entered through the main doors. He walked slowly down the central aisle to Earth's seats in the back corner. Every eye in the chamber followed him. The maintenance corridor beside Earth's section suddenly felt very far from the center of things. He sat down, placed his documents on the desk, and looked up at Voron Selith across the vast chamber. This time, no one laughed. This time, no one interrupted. This time, the chamber waited for the human to speak. Teho folded his hands and said nothing. Not yet. He let them wait. He let them feel what it was like to sit in silence, watching someone else hold the power in the room. Then he smiled, just barely, and opened his folder. Yoon Teho stood. The chamber lights did not shift for him. Humanity still had no color assigned in the Assembly's ancient protocol system. He had once found that embarrassing. Today, he did not care. He walked to the speaker's platform at the center of the Grand Chamber. No one moved to stop him. No one called a procedural objection. The species that had cut him off after 17 seconds yesterday now watched him take his place at the podium with the careful attention of people who had recently learned that underestimating someone could be very expensive. He placed a single data device on the podium. Then he looked up and began to speak. 11 years ago, Teho said, humanity was invited to join this assembly. We were told that membership meant protection, partnership, and mutual respect. We believed that. We signed 26 treaties with this body. Trade agreements, defense pacts, technology sharing accords, territorial boundaries. We followed every one of them. We reported our fleet numbers honestly. We opened our research to your science councils. We submitted to your inspections, your quotas, and your restrictions. We did everything you asked, because we believed that playing by the rules would earn us a place at this table. He paused. The silence in the chamber was so deep that the hum of the station's life support systems was audible. Yesterday, he continued, you showed us what that belief was worth. He touched the data device. The central display activated, showing the list of 12 grievances the Telvari had presented. Teho pointed at the third item, the accusation that humanity had expanded its colonial boundaries illegally. This is false, he said. Earth's colony on Voron 4 sits 300 kilometers inside the approved boundary, not 600 outside it. The coordinates in the Telvari filing were altered. Here is the original survey data. The display shifted to show both sets of numbers side by side. The difference was obvious. He moved to the seventh grievance, the claim that human cultural influence on minor species constituted deliberate contamination. The three species cited in this grievance, the Dolu, the Fenrath, and the Kier, were not exposed to human culture through any program or initiative. They found our music and our art on open trade networks and chose to adopt them freely. Here are their own public statements saying exactly that. 3 recordings played, each one showing an alien representative explaining that they had simply enjoyed human art and chosen to share it with their people. Teho went through every grievance. He was calm. He did not raise his voice. He simply presented facts, one after another, dismantling the case against humanity with the precision of a surgeon removing something rotten. Then he reached into the data device and played something new. It was a private communication between Voron Selith and Drew Pak, recorded 48 hours before the assembly vote. Doyen's intelligence network had obtained it 6 months ago and held it for exactly this moment. In the recording, Voron's voice was casual and amused. The motion will pass easily, he said. I have already secured votes from the Dolar bloc and the Outer Rim delegations. 3 of them needed financial encouragement, but the amounts were small. Once the humans are reduced, we can redistribute their colony zones to our allies. It is a simple reorganization. Drew Pak's voice responded. And if the humans object? Voron laughed. What will they do? Write a letter? They are pets, Drew. Clever pets, but pets. You do not negotiate with pets. You put them back in their cage and close the door. The recording ended. The chamber was completely still. Teho let the silence hold for 10 full seconds. Then he spoke again. 3 delegations were bribed to vote against us. The evidence is now available on your secure networks. The Dolar Confederacy, the Rith Union, and the Outer Rim Trade Alliance All received payments from Telvari discretionary funds within 72 hours of the vote. Movement rippled through the chamber. The Dolar delegation exchanged panicked looks. The Rith ambassador stood, and then sat down again, unsure of what to do. Tejo reached under the podium and brought out a thick document. Physical paper. An old human tradition that he had chosen deliberately. He placed it on the podium, with a sound that carried in the quiet. As of this moment, he said, Earth formally declares all existing treaties between humanity and the Galactic Assembly to be null and void. He began reading them, one by one. The Trade Facilitation Accord of Year 1. The Non-Aggression Compact of Year 3. The Technology Sharing Protocol of Year 5. The Colonial Boundary Agreement of Year 7. 26 treaties, each one named and formally revoked. You built these treaties on the assumption that we were beneath you, Tejo said. Every clause was written to keep us contained. Every provision was designed to limit our growth while giving us just enough to keep us quiet. We signed them because we believed in good faith. Yesterday, you showed us what that faith was worth. He placed both hands flat on the podium and looked across the chamber. Not at Voron, but at everyone. So we begin again, he said. But this time, we begin as equals, or we do not begin at all. He picked up the paper document and held it up for the chamber to see. This is a proposed treaty of equal standing. It requires full and permanent membership for Earth in this assembly, with equal voting rights. It requires the removal of all fleet restrictions on humanity. It requires a formal, public apology from the Telvari Dominion for the fabrication of evidence and the bribery of member delegations. And it requires that no species in this assembly may ever again be silenced on the chamber floor. He placed the document on the central podium and stepped back. Voron Selith rose immediately. His body was rigid, his segmented plates clicking with agitation. This is extortion, he said. This assembly does not negotiate under military threat. I reject this document and call for High Speaker. The voice came from behind Voron. It was Drew Pak. The military overseer had entered the chamber quietly during Tejo's speech. He stood near the Telvari delegation seats, his posture stiff, his dark eyes fixed on Voron. High Speaker, Drew said again, and this time the entire chamber heard the weight in his voice. I have reviewed the tactical situation in full. The human fleet currently holds 9 choke points across our forward territories. Our forward fleet is disabled, and will remain so for a minimum of 72 hours. Our reserve fleet's position and heading are known to the humans. If we move them, we expose them to the same weapon that disabled the forward fleet. He stepped closer to Voron. His voice did not waver. If you reject this treaty, they will not need to fire a single weapon. They have already won. The only question is whether we acknowledge that now, while we still have some dignity left, or whether we wait until there is none. For the first time in 30 years as High Speaker, he had nothing to say. The chamber waited. Then, from the far left section, a small delegation stood. The Fenrath, one of the species accused of being contaminated by human culture. Their ambassador spoke quietly. The Fenrath support Earth's treaty. Another delegation stood, then another. 12 species broke from the Telvari bloc within 3 minutes, then 20, then 40. Each one standing in turn, their voices steady, their choice clear. Voron Selith looked across the chamber at Tejo. The human met his gaze without expression, without triumph, without anger. Just patience. The kind of patience that comes from 11 years of being told you are not enough. Voron said nothing. He sat down heavily in his chair, and the chamber moved on without him. The vote was held at 9 o'clock the following morning. The chamber was full. Every delegation was present, which had not happened in over a decade. Species that normally sent junior representatives or skipped sessions entirely had recalled their senior ambassadors overnight. Everyone wanted to be there. Everyone wanted to say they had been in the room when it happened. The Treaty of Equal Standing was read aloud one final time by the Assembly's procedural secretary, a small gray creature from a species so old that no one remembered what they were called before they joined the Assembly. The secretary read in a flat, neutral voice, giving no weight to any clause, treating the most important document in modern galactic history the same way it would treat a water recycling schedule. Then the vote was called. The numbers climbed on the central display. In favor, 201. Against, 31. The Telvari Dominion and their remaining allies made up the opposition. But the number was so small that it barely mattered. The treaty passed with the largest majority the Assembly had recorded in 400 years. The chamber did not erupt in celebration. There was no applause. The moment was too large and too strange for that. Instead, there was a long, deep quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a room full of people understands that the world they knew yesterday no longer exists. Yoon Tae-ho sat in earth seats in the back corner, near the maintenance corridor, and watched the numbers on the display. His face showed nothing. His hands hidden beneath the desk were shaking. He pressed them flat against his knees and breathed. Han Do-yeon, sitting 3 rows behind him in the observation gallery, allowed himself a single small nod. Then he stood, left the chamber, and went to begin the long, quiet work of bringing his operatives home. Most of them came back safely. 12 operatives from 12 worlds, slipping out of the lives they had built over years, shedding their alien names and borrowed identities like old coats. They returned to Earth on commercial transports, sitting among ordinary passengers, looking like ordinary people. 2 did not come back. One had been stationed on a Telvari industrial world and was caught during the chaos following the Ember activation. The other had been on a deep cover assignment in the Outer Rim, and simply stopped responding. Do-yeon searched for them both for 3 months before he accepted what the silence meant. He added their names to a small memorial wall in his private office. The wall was behind a locked door that only he could open. He visited it once a week, stood before it for exactly 1 minute, and then returned to work. Voron Seleth was recalled by the Telvari government 4 days after the vote. The official statement said he was retiring from public service to pursue personal interests. Everyone understood what that meant. He left the assembly station on a private shuttle, accompanied by 2 aides and no honor guard. As he walked through the departure corridor, he passed Tae-ho coming the other way. They stopped. The corridor was empty except for the 2 of them and the low hum of the station's systems. Voron looked at Tae-ho for a long moment. His segmented face was difficult to read, but his eyes, those dark, ancient eyes, held something that might have been recognition. Not respect exactly, not apology, just the hollow understanding of someone who had made a terrible miscalculation and would spend the rest of his life knowing it. Tae-ho gave him a small nod. Not of forgiveness, not of triumph, just an acknowledgement that this chapter was closed. Voron walked past him and did not look back. Drew Pak requested a private meeting with Baek Jisoo. It was arranged aboard the Baekdu, in a small conference room with a window that looked out on the stars. Jisoo had her officers wait outside. Drew came alone. They sat across from each other. 2 military commanders from 2 species that had nearly gone to war. Drew studied the room. The clean lines, the efficient layout, the quiet confidence of a ship that had been built by people who knew exactly what they were doing and had chosen not to tell anyone. I argued against provoking your species, Drew said. His voice was direct. He was not a diplomat and did not pretend to be. I told Voron that the intelligence on human capabilities was incomplete. He did not listen. Then, next time, she said, argue louder. Something shifted in Drew's expression. It was not quite a smile. His species did not smile the way humans did. but it was close. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement from a soldier to a soldier, and then he left. Shin-Nari received the order to deactivate the Ember network 2 days after the treaty was signed. She powered down the satellites remotely, one system at a time, watching the grid of active signals shrink on her display until the map was dark and quiet again. But she did not dismantle them. The satellites remained where they were, dormant, invisible, drifting among the rocks and debris like sleeping animals. Her assistant, a young engineer named Cho Unji, noticed this and asked about it. Shouldn't we bring them in? Or at least decommission the charges? Nari looked at her for a moment, then turned back to her display. Fool me once, she said, and that was the end of the conversation. President Kwon Min-jae addressed the people of Earth on the evening after the treaty was ratified. He stood in the same office where he had watched the assembly vote 2 days earlier. This time, the screen behind him showed the vote count, 201 to 31. He spoke for 4 minutes. He did not boast. He did not mock the species that had tried to cage humanity. He was a man who understood that victory without grace was just another form of cruelty. They told us we were small, he said. They told us the galaxy was not ours to share. But we did not answer with hatred. We answered with precision, with unity, and with the simple refusal to be made less than what we are. Today, humanity stands as an equal member of the Galactic Assembly, not because we asked for permission, because we proved that we belonged. He paused, and his voice softened. To the species who stood with us, the 4 who voted against the motion when it cost them nothing to stay silent, we will not forget. To the species who stood against us, we are not your enemies. We never were. We only asked to be seen. From today, we will be. He ended the broadcast. 7 billion people watched it, and for a few minutes, the whole planet was quiet. The final scene belonged to Taeho. He stood alone on the observation deck of the assembly station, a wide curved room with a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out into open space. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue dot, barely brighter than the stars around it. From here, you could cover it with your thumb. He was tired. He had barely slept in 2 days. His suit was wrinkled. His hands, which had been so steady in the chamber, were trembling now that there was no one left to perform for. He thought about the 4 species that had voted for Earth when no one else would. He thought about Ona Reese, who had pulled her ships back without asking a single question. He thought about Nari, who had spent 6 years building something she hoped would never be used. He thought about Jisoo, standing alone on the bridge of a ship that was never supposed to exist, giving an order that could not be taken back. He thought about the 2 operatives who had not come home. His communicator buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and read the message. It was from Ona Reese. You humans are terrifying. Please do not ever change. Taeho laughed. It was a quiet, tired sound, barely more than a breath, but it was real. He put the communicator away and looked back at Earth. That small blue dot, that impossible, stubborn, brilliant little world that had just made the entire galaxy take a step back and think twice. The sun was rising over the Pacific. From this distance, it was just a thin line of gold creeping across the blue. But Taeho watched it like it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Because after everything, the humiliation, the long night, the dawn, the reckoning, that sunrise meant something simple and enormous. They had made it, and they would never be small again.